Nobody really lives alone. We exist together, whether it's in the same neighborhood or meeting online. We interact in communities really, with other people with whom we share experiences and identities. Our communities help define who we are, giving us a sense of us. Living in a community is a universal shared characteristic of humans. But although the need for community might be a constant, how humans met that need has changed over the long sweep of history. Sometimes those changes are small, but a few times in the past hundreds of thousands of years, we have drastically altered or remade the types, nature, and size of the communities in which we lived. Humans have shaped those changes, and those changes have in turn shaped us and who we are. The communities frame captures some of the biggest changes in our communities, and it's going to help you navigate your journey through world history. In telling this story, we're going to focus on a few important types of human communities: cities, states, and religions. But remember, we're going to be leaving stuff out, details that support, extend, or challenge the story. And you're going to be able to fill in those details as you go through the course, learning stuff that you can use to test the claims we make in this frame, to make it more accurate and complete, or to make it more meaningful to you. Our narrative of the communities frame begins in Unit 2, in the year 1200. This was a world of really diverse communities. Vast distances and physical barriers separated humans into different regions, fostering huge variations in the way people organized themselves. People lived in kingdoms, in chiefdoms, and in tribes, in empires, in city-states, in kin-based groups, and in many other types of communities. And they practiced many different forms of religion. Though there were exceptions, however, most people didn't interact with people from distant communities. Life in 1200, you see, was local for almost everyone. Then, in Unit 3, the first sustained transoceanic connections linked up the Americas, Afro-Eurasia, and the Pacific, forever transforming communities all over the globe. New linkages brought new ideas and people to new communities as Europeans conquered vast overseas empires. But in this same era, several powerful Eurasian land-based empires conquered the remnants of the collapsed Mongol Empire. Both the oceanic and the land-based empires ruled these territories that had many different communities of people who had different languages and customs and religions. Empires have been around for thousands of years, but new characteristics began to emerge in this era. Still, even in large empires, people continued to participate in and identify with smaller, more local communities, families, villages, and cities. But people also created new communities that moved beyond local areas, and these communities blended different ideas and cultures. These communities often stretched between cities and empires, uniting people with shared beliefs, interests, and occupations. Unit 4 begins in the 18th century, when a series of revolutions launched a new kind of community, the nation-state. In this type of community, political authority rested with a nation, a population of people living in a common region who shared what they believed was a common identity. And nation-states grew, although they grew slowly. Empires remained the dominant community through Unit 7, even as powerful nation-states engaged in two global conflicts. But empires began to crumble in the last two units of the course, as people fought to free themselves from empire and to establish their own independent nation-states. Today, people participate in communities of many different types and sizes, but the nation-state has become the most powerful sort of community shaping our identities. These days, we could even say, we live in a world of nation-states. Now, in telling this story, we might have made the transition between types of communities seem smooth, but it wasn't. There were often tensions between and among people living in different types of communities. For example, as transoceanic connections were established in Unit 3, they came with extreme violence as Europeans conquered indigenous communities in the Americas and enslaved over 12 million Africans, decimating West African populations for generations. And over the last 200 years or so, the desire for independent nation-states has exerted powerful and disruptive forces on empires, some of which had survived for hundreds of years. And importantly, this is likely not the final state of human communities. Innovations like the internet and jet airlines offer ways for us to create communities of people who don't live together and who may never even meet in person. New international communities and even virtual communities are emerging alongside traditional community groups like families and cities, the nation state, and religion. Yet this increasing globalization has not made the local community less relevant, but rather more. In the confusion of the wider world, our identities, our religions and neighborhoods, our ethnicities and our nations often seem like safe, comforting places to retreat to and to find support. The tool that we've created to understand these processes, what we call the communities frame, should help you remember and use this big story. You might use it to locate the details of the events you'll study in a larger story. You'll see, for example, that we've threaded the story of communities through the units that we use to structure the course. We hope that thinking about different ways to view the history of human communities, moving back and forth between our larger communities and our local ones, will help you see more clearly the role that community plays in the present. And what's going to happen next? What kinds of communities does the future hold? And how can we learn from the communities of the past? These are the questions that make it valuable for us to study the long history of human communities.